What's up, everybody? It's Mike here from The Art of Guitar, here to talk about the techniques involved in Hotel California solo. What I noticed is a lot of people try to play the solo by reading the tab, and you can find tab for the solo anywhere. But as far as the techniques go, they don't always have the proper techniques, so that even when they do try to play the solo, if they're playing the correct frets, it doesn't quite sound right. So I wanted to dive into those today. So right off the bat, you've got this 1.5 bend that you have to do immediately following the first slide. Now, if you notice, I'm bending the 2nd string 12th fret, and I'm bending it up 1.5. And remember, if you bend a note, a whole step is 2 frets, 1.5 is going to be 3 frets. So if you want to just go up there and listen to what it sounds like just to get an idea, it's a good idea to do that. Then you know to bend to that pitch. Just like that. So you end up with this. Later on, so I believe that's Joe Walsh's part, bending it a whole 1.5. Okay, we talked about 1.5 bends. Let's go ahead and talk about half-step bends. And these are used very artistically in this solo. And what I like is they're going half step below a note and bending up to that next fret. You could also use your middle finger for a little more control, because then you have 2 fingers. That's totally fine. So watch how I do this part. That's the middle finger version, index finger version. Another example of a half-step bend is actually before that part. There's this really odd part where they go like this. Hear that half step approach again? So you're underneath by 1/2 step and you bring it up. All kinds of bends to start this off with, so you're gonna have to really have control of those fingers. The quarter bend is so huge, but people don't usually realize it till way later in their guitar careers, because it's not that obvious that somebody's doing it. To me, at least, until you take it away, then it kind of seems flat compared to what you're used to. So here's an example of that. So you see that little quarter bend I'm doing? This is on the 3rd string 7th fret. And instead of just going right from that note to the next note, I'm giving it just a tiny bit of a bend. Quarter bend, not quite a half bend. That'd be kind of big. In this case, in between where you are starting out and what a half step bend would be. Very slight. Angus Young is great at doing this as well. So here's what we have. See, it's just a little scoop right before you go to the next part. Then, of course, the next part, it's back. If you leave the pinky down while you bend the ring finger up, you get this really great sound. I call it the country bend. So we're back to that lick from before. But to get to that, it's such a great sound when you can separate the strings like that. Another version of the country bend is actually going to the 3rd string 9th fret, bending that up a whole step, and then we're going to go back to that D with our pinky on the 1st string. I really love string mutes with the pick, because I love the rhythmic feeling you get from it, because I play drums as well, so it really feels like I'm connecting to the music. And they have a really cool way of adding a couple clicks, I'll call them, during the solo. Here's an example. So it's a little subtle, but it's right before that country bend I was just talking about. It's 2 clicks on the string with a pick. And remember, just take your left hand and touch the strings to get that muted sound. Alternating motifs is always fun, because sometimes people play one motif and they want to just keep doing it in a circle. But to alternate them is kind of a good idea sometimes. So let's just do the old Chuck Berry, where we take the 3rd string 9th fret, we're going to bend it up a whole step, and then we're going to play the 7th fret and then the 7th fret of the next 2 strings. It's pretty common, right? It's on a lot of the the Artist Series videos because it's such a great sound. Now, if we were to combine that with this motif, we've got this now where we go to the 9th fret, bend it up a whole step, go to the 7th fret of the 2nd string, but this time go to the 10th fret of the 2nd string afterwards. So you get this 3-note motif. Now, if I alternate between them, starting with the one I just did, doesn't that sound interesting? Instead of just doing the same one over and over again. And then right away, Joe Walsh comes in, and he's doing sort of the same thing. He starts out sort of similar, but then moves on to the Chuck Berry thing more. So you can see, just by alternating it a little bit, it makes it more interesting. Since we're there, we might as well do the bend slide. And I love it because it's such a quick slide, but it makes a big difference in the sound. There's just a quick little up slide. Just like that. Gives it some character versus just killing the bend. Instead, I love that. And there's another part too where they slide down, so we can go either way as you're playing. So sometimes to make things interesting, as I'm going to a lick, I'll slide up into it. Kind of like the intro to it. Imagine if it just went. I really love Chromatic Walks up and down. Slash does this a lot. There's a part where Joe Walsh walks down chromatically. One more time. I believe it was Slash that said you could play whatever you want as long as you end up on the correct note. All right, this is what I call a 2-string bend and release. So what we're going to do in this case, in context to the song, we're going to walk up from G. We're going to bend the A up a whole step. And if you notice when you bend, you're also bending the 2nd string. So we're going to bend in the 1st string, go to the 2nd string, play that, and drop it down. So it's kind of like handing off to the next string. Now we're going to do the country bend, but instead of releasing the bend, we're going to only release it half step and bring it back up. So you're bending up a whole step, hitting the top note, and then coming back to the bent note and only dropping it half a step before returning it back up. It takes a lot of bend control. So real slow. I love it when guitar players do this, where they just slide down instead of playing a scale. It creates a cool effect. So if you could tell what I'm doing here, I'm bending at the 13th fret of the 2nd string, and I'm doing sort of this unison bend, but one piece at a time. So you see that's just like kind of like a Chuck Berry thing as well, like a broken up unison bend. Then I'm dropping down to the 11th fret of the 3rd string, and I'm just sliding down. Like that. I wish I could slide further, but I can't, because I have to go to the 9th fret of the 4th string and go like this. So as I'm sliding, I know I have to catch myself. It's like falling off the side of a building, but catching a ledge right before you end up crashing. And then we end up coming back up. This one has kind of not as sad of a sound, and to get the idea of it would be a bend, and you keep picking as you drop it down. But what I really like is if you add a little vibrato on the way down, like you don't just do a smooth drop, you kind of fight it as you go down, it creates this kind of shaky sound. So if I just dropped it, that's great too. By the way, there's that quarter bend, it's back. If you shake it as you go down, gives it a whole nother dynamic. There's a great exercise I believe everyone should do with pentatonic scales. And that's just a sequence. And that's where we're going to go like this. We're not going to play the whole, we're not going to play it in context completely. But the idea is a staggered walk down. So if you took a pentatonic scale, let's say it's just minor pentatonic here. Sorry if the phaser is bothering you. I'm just going to leave it on for the rest of the lesson. If you walk down in a staggered way, try this once. Take the top note, drop down underneath it on the second string, come back to the note you skipped, drop that down, go to the note you skipped, see, with pentatonic, it creates these really cool patterns, almost straight lines. There's times when you don't have that, but for the most part, in this case, for this exercise, you're walking down straight lines. You can go the other way too. But in this case, we're just going to descend with it. And they start with a bend, and then they start descending. But then they kind of break the pattern to do other things, but that's the concept behind it. All right, we're going to play some 3 patterns. Now, typically, I would pull off, and I would do sort of a Metallica type thing. But I was watching them play it live, and they seem to pick everything. So go ahead and pick these notes. It's just going to be descending 3s. I love the way this harmonizes in thirds, so I'm going to show you that in a second. But right now, just focus on taking 3 notes. We're going to go to the second string, 19th fret, then the 15th fret, then we're going to go to the 3rd string, 16th fret. And we're going to do that as a rotating pattern of 3. The hard part is not letting this note ring out as you go to the middle finger note. Then we walk it down, 17th fret, 14th fret on the second string, reach down to the 3rd string, 15th fret. Then they do this cool slide. So if you put it together, you get this. The other guitarist is doing something similar, so Joe Walsh is here. He's doing more of a difficult pattern because after he gets off the B, he's shooting down to the F sharp with the same finger. So it ends up being this rocking motion. Remember for the Skinnerd stuff, I said you don't always have to worry about rolling your finger. Sometimes letting the notes ring out together is cool, but in this case, they're dueling guitars, so they want to keep it clean. Then they do a... And through some overdubbing, post-production work, I'm going to put them together, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's an example of harmonizing lead guitar. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed those techniques. Hotel California solo has always been sort of an enigma to me because I always remember hearing it, but I didn't know all the little details involved in playing the solo. So it took a long time to really try to figure those out for you guys, and hopefully it helps you develop your own techniques with them. All right, guys, we'll see you at the next lesson.